We've seen many ancient authors struggle with the question of divine justice. Most obviously, Job complains that the wicked live long and happy lives while the righteous suffer. In the context of the sack of Rome, many questions along these same lines arose. In his defense of Christianity, Augustine attempts to address himself to some of these. One of the puzzles is why good people have suffered in the calamity while the bad have profited from it. Or put differently, why does God show such kindness and mercy toward those who are, quote, godless and ungrateful? Augustine tries out a number of explanations for this. He claims that by receiving God's mercy, some of the wicked people reform their ways and turn to God. The others who remain in their iniquity will be punished after the last judgment, and so in the end, they do not really profit from divine mercy or leniency in the temporal sphere, despite all appearances to the contrary. As for the good people who suffer, according to Augustine, God is merely testing them so that they will learn patience. They will ultimately receive their reward later after the judgment of God. To the question of why good people and bad people seem to receive both the good things and the bad things in temporal life, with no distinction being made, Augustine argues that when the good people see that the bad ones receive the goods of this world, the former will realize that these goods are worthless and will not remain fixated on them. Likewise, when they see that they are subject to temporal evils, they will no longer regard these things as a threat to be afraid of. Since even the good people are overly attached to mundane existence and its pleasures, God punishes the good along with the evil with temporal misfortunes in order to show them that the temporal goods are not what is ultimately important. In short, when seeing this, people will learn that mundane blessings and misfortunes are not of real value. Augustine writes, quote, "The good man is not exalted by this world's goods, nor is he overwhelmed by this world's ills." By contrast, he continues, quote, "The bad man is punished by misfortune of this kind just because he is corrupted by good fortune." So while it might appear at first glance that the bad people are enjoying the pleasures of mundane life, such as money or fame, in fact, these things only serve to corrupt them. They gain no profit from them. While it's true that the good and the bad both suffer, the nature of their sufferings and the results of it are very different. When the wicked suffer, they become angry and curse God, but when the good suffer, they endure it patiently, like Job. In connection with the sack of Rome, Augustine claims that while it's true that the Christians have suffered, they have been improved morally by the disaster. It becomes an occasion for them to consider their own sinfulness. While they're not guilty of the great sins which have brought on the calamity, nonetheless, they're guilty of lesser sins. The disaster thus allows them to dwell on their own shortcomings and improve their moral character. Augustine argues that true Christians are not harmed by being deprived of their possessions or worldly goods. Their true capital lies in the inward sphere with their relation to God. Here again, we can see the inversion of values that Christianity brings about. External riches mean nothing, but the goal is to develop internal wealth. This recalls Jesus' criticism of the rich in his command that they sell their possessions and follow him. Augustine quotes the passage that we discussed from Matthew, where Jesus commands his followers, quote, "Do not store up treasures on earth, but rather in heaven." In the context of the sack of Rome, this was good advice since it meant that one was invulnerable to the Visigoth attack. Although the Visigoths could take one's possessions, it was impossible for them to enter into the inward sphere of religiosity of the individual. This idea was presumably a source of great strength and consolation, not just to those who had lost their possessions, but also to the poor who had very little in the first place. Augustine carries this argument a step further and claims that even when one is deprived of one's life, this is not to be regarded as a loss in the Christian view. While there were many Christians who were indeed killed in the Visigoth invasion, if they led a virtuous life, they will be rewarded by God after the last judgment. So even their own lives should be regarded as transitory, temporal goods, which they should not covet or cling to. The true Christian has no reason to fear death. Once again, Augustine inverts the reigning value system of the Romans and introduces what was presumably a very counterintuitive idea.